The wind slammed against the cabin like it had a grudge to settle. Elias Redford stood in the doorway, coat unbuttoned, hair damp with snow, staring out at a sky so heavy it looked like it might collapse. He clutched the telegram in one hand. Crumpled. Read too many times. Isabel McRae arriving Wednesday. Stop. Stagecoach Buffalo route. Stop. She was coming. Or she wasn't. Either way, something was about to change. Behind him, the stove hissed and spat as a log split, releasing a pop that made Clara flinch. She was hunched over the kitchen table, stirring oatmeal she had no intention of eating. "Is she coming today?" she asked without looking up. "Stage is due by noon," Elias said. "If the road ain't closed, I hope it is." He didn't answer. Clara stabbed her spoon into the bowl hard enough to tilt it. Mama wouldn't want her here. Elias shut the door, sealing out the wind. "Your mama would want you raised right. I can't do that alone. We've been fine. Fine ain't the same as right." That got him a look, her mother's look. Chin-up eyes sharp enough to draw blood. "I ain't calling her mama," Clara said. "No one's asking you to." "Good." She snatched her coat off the peg and stormed out the back door. The wind caught it mid-swing and slammed it hard enough to rattle the windows. Elias didn't chase her. He just stood there for a long minute, the cold creeping into his bones. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Anna died. Fever took her in less than a day. No warning. No chance to bargain with God. He'd buried her under the cottonwood tree by the creek, the one that never quite lost all its leaves, built a fence around it, planted wildflowers that wouldn't grow. Since then, it was just him and Clara, and the silence. God, the silence. He wasn't looking for love when he sent the letter. Just company. A woman who could help raise a daughter, tend a home, maybe smile at him once in a while like life hadn't already ended. The agency gave him a name and not much else. Isabel McRae. Age 28. Protestant. Educated. Widowed. Sound moral character. He sent money for her stage fare and a decent dress. He hadn't expected her to actually come. And he sure as hell hadn't expected the fear. By 10, the snow was coming down so thick you couldn't see the ridge. Elias threw another log in the stove, made coffee that tasted like dirt, and sat at the table. Clara hadn't come back in yet. She'd sulk in the barn until the storm made her fingers numb. He couldn't blame her. The house still smelled faintly like Anna. Rose soap, wool, the biscuits she used to burn on purpose because Elias liked the crust. He rubbed his hands together. They were cracked from the cold and work and time. He didn't feel young anymore, or old, just stuck. There was a knock on the door. No, not a knock. A sound like a voice. Distant, muffled by the storm. He stood heart-skipping and moved to the window. A dark shape approached through the snow, flanked by another. Then another. The stagecoach was crawling up the mountain road like a wounded animal, wheels groaning under the weight. Elias stepped outside, boots crunching 6 inches into new snow. The wind clawed at his coat. He didn't care. He watched as the coach came to a slow, labored stop at the edge of the yard. The driver jumped down his face like worn leather snow crusting his hat brim. "You Elias Redford, yeah." "Good luck," the man muttered. "You'll need it." Elias frowned. What the hell's that mean? But the driver was already swinging open the coach door, and that's when Elias saw her. She didn't step out first. A boy did. 14, maybe 15. Eyes full of fight, jaw set like stone. He stepped aside and offered a hand to someone inside. Isabel McRae emerged. She was thinner than he imagined, paler. Her coat barely held together, her hair a tangled halo of black waves. Her eyes met Elias's, and in them, he saw something that shook him worse than any snowstorm: resignation. She wasn't expecting kindness. She was bracing for rejection. And then came the third. A little girl no older than 5, too light for her boots to make prints in the snow. She clung to Isabel's skirts, silent as snowfall. The driver tossed 2 threadbare bags onto the ground. "That's everything. Good luck to you." He climbed back onto the coach, slapped the reins, and vanished into white. Isabel stood there with 2 children, neither of them hers, by blood. Elias would later learn, and nothing else. "Mrs. McRae," Elias said. "Miss," she corrected. "I never married." The agency just thought widow sounded better. The first lie. And it wouldn't be the last. "This is Nico," she said, touching the boy's shoulder. He jerked away. "And this is Lark." The little girl didn't move, didn't speak. Elias looked from them back to Isabel. The letter didn't mention children. "I know," she said quietly. "I figured if I told the truth, no one would answer." She was right. 3 agencies had turned her down. He'd been the 4th. "I don't offer charity," Elias said. "Good," Nico snapped. "We don't want any." Isabel reached out, but the boy stepped back. Elias exhaled. Cold burned his lungs. Behind him, the barn door creaked open. Clara stood in the frame, arms, crossed, eyes hard. She was watching, listening. Elias looked back at Isabel. The bruises on her cheek weren't fresh, but they told a story no letter ever would. "You're all staying," he said. Isabel blinked. "All of us," I said what I said. Nico looked ready to swing. Elias met his stare, unmoving, unafraid. "You want to walk back to Kansas, there's the road. But your aunt and that girl stay." Nico's jaw worked, but Isabel's hand on his sleeve steadied him. "Please," she whispered. And just like that, the fight drained out of him. They moved slowly toward the cabin. Clara didn't budge from the doorway. "Say hello," Elias said. "Hello," Clara said, voice like a slap. "You must be Clara." Isabel offered, tentative. "He never told me about you," Clara replied. "Except you were coming alone." "Plans change," Isabel said. "People too." "You always say you can't trust what changes," Clara snapped at her father. Elias's voice was firm. "Inside. Now." Clara turned and disappeared into the house. Behind him, Isabel whispered, "She'll hate me." "She might," Elias said. "But she'll learn." Isabel stepped over the threshold. So did Nico. So did Lark, never letting go of Isabel's coat. Elias lingered one moment longer on the porch, watching as the storm erased the coach's tracks, as if they'd never come. "You didn't say there'd be 4 of us," she said. "Because I figured one lie was already too many." The door shut behind them with a groan, and suddenly the storm wasn't the loudest thing in the world anymore. Inside, it was silent in the way churches are before a burial. The warmth from the stove hit them in layers, first. The smell of wood smoke, then the slow thaw in fingers, then the sting in their faces as frozen skin came back to life. Elias motioned to the chairs around the table. "Sit if you want." Isabel hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Clara, who stood near the stove, arms crossed, boots dripping meltwater onto the plank floor. Nico stayed near the door, one hand still clenched like he might punch the wind itself if it dared to blow again. Lark said nothing. Her fingers wound tight in Isabel's skirt, a shadow with no sound. I can make coffee, Elias offered. Don't bother, Clara muttered. Elias gave her a look. It's not for you, I know. He moved to the stove anyway, grabbing the old kettle, filling it from the bucket by the door. The water was half ice. It would take time. Isabel slowly lowered herself into the nearest chair, moving like someone afraid the wood might splinter beneath her. Lark climbed into her lap without a word. She was so light, Isabel barely noticed. I didn't expect Elias started. I know, she said. And I'm sorry. You didn't say there'd be 4 of us. Her mouth pulled tight, because I figured one lie was already too many. He leaned against the counter watching her. That little girl, she yours? Isabel shook her head. My niece. Her mama, my sister, died last spring. Her father, he's the reason we left. Nico scoffed under his breath but said nothing. Elias folded his arms. And the boy, I brother, half-brother, same mother, different fathers. So you're the only one with my name on the contract. That's right. And yet I've got a house full of strangers. I won't blame you if you send us away, she said, voice quiet. But please don't do it tonight. Elias looked towards the window. Snow coming down sideways. Night swallowing what little light the day had left. You wouldn't get far, he said. Not in that. She nodded, and for the first time he saw the tremble in her shoulders. Not from cold, from holding it all together too long. Nico shifted, uncomfortable. We didn't come here to beg. Sure as hell looks like it, Clara snapped. Clara, Elias said sharp now. She stared at him, cheeks flushed with heat and fury. You said this woman was coming to help. You didn't say we were taking in a whole orphanage. We're not. Could have fooled me. Isabel stood Lark still in her arms. We'll sleep in the barn if that's better for you. You're not sleeping in a barn, Elias said. Clara's voice cracked. Mama wouldn't want this. She's not here to want anything, Elias said. Silence fell like snow on tin. Isabel didn't flinch, didn't fight. She simply said, We'll do whatever you need to feel safe in your home, Clara. But we're not here to take anything from you. Clara turned and left the room, her boots thudding down the hall. Elias poured boiling water into the pot. The smell of burnt coffee grounds filling the air. He handed Isabel a tin cup. Ain't much, but it's hot. Thank you. Nico refused a cup when offered. His eyes stayed on the floorboards. You got anywhere else to go? Elias asked. No, Isabel said. And I wouldn't take them back east even if I did. Is the father looking for her? Yes. Elias nodded slowly, jaw clenched. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Later that night, after blankets were passed out and beds rearranged, Elias found himself in the barn. Again. Second night in a row. He set up a cot near the feed sacks, lit a lantern, and sat there a long while with his boots off, and his thoughts clawing at him. He thought about Clara, about the way her voice had cracked, about the look in Isabel's eyes when she offered to leave. He couldn't shake it. It was like watching a person drown silently in the middle of a crowd. That's what she looked like, someone who'd learned to drown without thrashing. In the house, Isabel lay beside Lark on a quilt Clara's mother had sewn. She kept her eyes open even in the dark. Her hands trembled against the fabric. Nico was asleep on the floor nearby, curled around his coat. She could feel the tension in the walls, in the very wood of the place. It wasn't just that they weren't welcome. It was that they had unsettled something deep. A quiet grief now interrupted. Lark stirred beside her. Mama, no, sweetheart. Isabel whispered. It's me. Lark didn't answer, just turned toward her and pressed her forehead into Isabel's chest. She hadn't spoken more than a few words in months. Not since that night. Not since the screaming, the door slamming, the silence that followed. Isabel didn't cry. Not anymore. She'd burned through tears weeks ago. Instead, she whispered, "You're safe. I promise. I promise." And she lay there repeating it like a prayer, hoping someday it might be true. The next morning brought a sky full of silver and a world buried to the waist in snow. Elias was already splitting wood when Clara stepped out, coat half-buttoned, jaw still set. "She's not staying forever, is she?" she asked. "I don't know, she better not." Elias leaned on the axe. "It ain't as simple as that." She lied. "She survived." "That's not the same. It is when the only choices are bad ones." Clara turned away. "I still ain't calling her Mama." Elias smiled, bitter and soft. "No one's asking you to." Inside, Isabel swept the floor in silence. Nico sat at the table watching the snow fall. "You said he was different," Nico muttered. "He doesn't look different. He let us stay. For now." Lark was drawing in the frost on the window with one finger. Simple circles, the only sound in the room. Elias stepped in, stomped the snow off his boots. "We need to talk." Isabel straightened. "All right." He glanced at the girl, then at Nico. "In private." She followed him into the next room, heart already tight. "You got more lies I should know about?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I can tell you the truth now." She told him about Kansas, about Robert Holloway, about the bruises, the threats the night she found her sister broken on the floor, and Lark hiding in a cupboard with blood on her dress. She told him about the papers she forged, the name she changed, the price she paid to get this far. When she was done, Elias didn't speak for a while. He just looked at her like a man reading a ledger and finding the numbers didn't add up, but maybe they didn't have to. Finally, he said, "And if he comes looking, I won't let him take her." Why, she asked. "Because there's more than one way to be a man." She exhaled. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Storms coming from two directions now." Outside, the wind howled like it knew something none of them did. And down the mountain, in a different town, a letter was being opened. A man in a fine coat read the name, Isabel McRae, and smiled like a wolf catching a scent. "This house ain't big enough for ghosts and strangers both," Clara whispered, staring out the window as the wind moaned through the cracks in the cabin walls. She didn't say it to anyone in particular. Just the glass, the snow, the silence that now felt heavier with every breath. Down the hall, footsteps creaked, strange footsteps. Not her father's, not familiar. It made her shoulders tense every time they crossed behind her. She missed the old quiet, the kind where grief had space to breathe, the kind where it was just her and her memories of Mama. Now there were new voices, new shadows, and they didn't belong. At the kitchen table, Nico snapped a kindling stick across his knee like he was trying to break something besides wood. His eyes never stopped watching walls, doors, exits. He didn't sit like he planned to stay. "Don't do that," Elias said from the hearth, voice calm but with weight behind it. "What, you'll splinter it too thin to catch." "It'll burn," Nico muttered. "Not long enough." Nico stared into the flames. "Maybe that's the point." Elias didn't reply. He just returned to the pot of beans simmering on the stove. They'd been stretching everything since the snow came down. No trips to town, no new supplies. Just what the earth had already given and what they hadn't lost yet. Across the room, Lark sat on the floor with a rag doll Clara hadn't seen in years, one Mama sewed from scraps and corn husks. Lark hadn't said a word all day. She hadn't really spoken at all since they arrived, not beyond the whisper of Mama 2 nights ago. Clara watched her like she was watching a bird that might fly away at any second. Isabel stood behind the girl, folding blankets fresh from the line. Her hands moved like she'd done it 1,000 times in 100 different houses, none of which ever stayed home long enough to matter. Clara hated how practiced she looked. How quiet. How useful. "I could have done that," Clara muttered. Isabel didn't look up. "I know you could have. But you didn't." Elias turned his head slightly. "Isabel." "No, it's all right," she said gently. "I'm not here to take anything from her." "You already did," Clara said louder now. "You took his attention, his time. You took his place beside the fire. You even sleep where Mama used to." Isabel's hands stilled. The folded blanket stayed tight in her grip, but her knuckles whitened. "I didn't choose that room," she said. "I sleep there because your father gave it to me. I don't try to fill her space. I wouldn't dare." "Then why are you still here?" Clara demanded. "Because I had nowhere else to go," Isabel said. "But if you ask your father to send us away, I'll go." Lark looked up, small and wide-eyed. Clara faltered. Her voice was sharp, but her chest hurt. Elias stood up. "That's enough." "No," Clara snapped. "It's not. This house ain't big enough for ghosts and strangers both." The silence that followed was different. Not cold, but hollow. Isabel stepped away from the girl and laid the blanket on the back of a chair. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight." "You won't," Elias said. "It might give her peace. She needs to learn to live with people, not scare them off." Isabel hesitated, then nodded. "I'll still pack up a bedroll, just in case." Nico got to his feet. "I'll sleep outside too. No offense, but your daughter's got a bite worse than a coyote." "You'll stay in here where it's warm," Elias said. "You planning to tie me down? No. But I will make you chop wood until your arms fall off if you keep talking like that." That got a flicker of something in Nico's face, not quite a smile, but not scorn either. He sat back down. That night, Clara lay awake, her back to the wall, watching the flicker of firelight spill through the bottom of her door. She could hear the muffled sounds of Elias talking in the next room. Not loud, not angry, just low and steady. Isabel's voice answered quieter, almost too soft to hear. Clara closed her eyes tight. She wanted to remember Mama's voice instead. But it was fading. And now every new word that filled the house seemed to take up the space where her memory used to live. In the other room, Elias poured 2 cups of tea. No coffee left, just dried mint and hot water. He handed one to Isabel. "Thank you," she said. He sipped his and let the silence settle. "Then I saw Clara by the tree line earlier. She doesn't like being inside anymore." "She used to," Elias said. "Used to sit right next to the stove every night with her feet on the grate and a book in her lap. Anna would read her poems." Isabel held the cup tighter. "Do you want me gone?" "No." "You sure you don't cause the fire by showing up during it?" Isabel looked into the tea, then away. "I don't blame her. She doesn't understand yet. She understands plenty. Maybe more than most her age should." He nodded. "That's why she's angry." They sat in silence again until Elias finally asked, "Was it always this hard?" Isabel didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was almost too quiet. "No. Sometimes it's worse." Lark woke crying that night. It wasn't loud. more like a whimper, a strangled sound that filled the hallway and dragged Clara out of bed without thinking. She found the girl curled in her blanket on the floor, eyes wide and wet. "Shh," Clara whispered, kneeling beside her. "It's okay." Lark blinked up at her. "Is it safe?" Clara's breath caught. No one had taught her that question. No one should have had to. "Yeah," Clara whispered. "You're safe. I promise." She held out her arms awkwardly. Lark hesitated, then crawled into them. They sat like that until the fire burned low and the house went still again. Morning broke colder than before. The wind had died down, but the weight of everything hadn't. Elias stepped out to check the barn and found Nico already there, chopping kindling like he was trying to outrun a memory. Up early. Didn't sleep. Elias picked up a second axe. "Good. We've got work." They chopped side by side for a while. Then Nico said, "You think we're gonna stay?" Elias looked at him. "That up to you, it's up to your daughter." Elias didn't argue. "I ain't trying to replace nobody," Nico said. "Neither am I." "Feels like it, though." "I know." The rhythm of axes kept time with the silence. Inside, Isabel found Clara folding Lark's dress without being asked. They didn't speak, but for the first time they weren't looking at each other like enemies. By midday, Elias rode out to check the old trap lines. He needed space to think, and meat if they were going to feed 5 mouths for another week. As he crested the hill near Miller's Creek, he spotted something strange: boot prints where there should be none. Fresh. Too fresh. He crouched and studied them. Deep, heavy, men traveling light and fast. He straightened slowly, hand drifting to his rifle. Something had found its way up the mountain. And it wasn't the cold. "You don't owe broken people a place to break more," Nico snapped. "But I ain't here to break anything." He kicked the barn door open so hard it bounced off the side post. Elias followed him in, not in a rush, letting the cold roll past like it might take some of the heat from the boy's anger. Nico was pacing, hands clenched, eyes hot. "I heard her last night," he said, "talking about me, about us, about how we don't belong." Elias shut the door and leaned against it. "She's scared. Scared people hurt others." "You think I don't know that?" Nico looked at him, breathing hard. "Then why are we still here?" "Because I don't believe what breaks you has to define you." "That's a nice sermon," Nico spat. "But that's not how the world works." Elias crossed his arms. "No, but that's how this mountain works. You live here, you pull your weight, you respect the peace. I don't care what you ran from. I care about what you're willing to stand for now." Nico kicked a pile of straw. "What if I'm not sure? Then figure it out before the snow melts. 'Cause come spring, we'll all be making choices." Silence dropped like a hammer. Nico turned toward the back wall where the boards had gaps wide enough to show thin stripes of gray light. "You ever want to burn everything down just to see what grows?" after Elias stepped beside him. "Yeah, I have. But I didn't. And now there's a little girl asleep under a roof I didn't destroy." Nico didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. Back inside, Isabel was chopping onions for stew, and Clara was beside her washing carrots in a chipped porcelain basin. The air smelled like broth, clean earth, and something like calm. Lark sat at the table, her rag doll in her lap, humming a tune no one recognized. "Do you want me to cut them thinner?" Clara asked, knife poised. "They're perfect," Isabel said. Clara hesitated. "I used to help Mama in the kitchen. Only, she never let me use the good knife." Isabel smiled softly. "I can stop if it's too much." No, I want to. The knife tapped gently on the cutting board. Outside, the wind had settled into a kind of hush. I was wrong, Clara said after a while. Isabel looked up. About what, you being here? I still miss her. That's not going to change, but maybe having someone else to talk to doesn't mean I'm forgetting her. Isabel set down the ladle. She'd be proud of you for saying that. Clara gave her a sideways glance. You didn't know her. I didn't have to. I know you. For the first time, Clara didn't flinch at the kindness. She nodded and went back to the carrots. When Elias and Nico came in from the barn, the warmth hit them like a memory. Lark ran to Isabel holding a drawing in both hands. Look, she said. Just one word, but it was enough to still every hand in the room. Clara dropped the towel. Elias froze in the doorway. Nico's eyes widened. Lark held up a crayon drawing a stick figure woman in a long dress, a cabin, a tree, and 4 people holding hands. She spoke, Clara whispered. Isabel knelt slowly, brushing hair back from Lark's eyes. Can you say it again, baby? Lark pointed to the picture. Us. Isabel pulled her close, squeezing until her arms trembled. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it's us. Elias swallowed hard. He looked at Nico, who looked away. That night after supper, Elias stepped out for a walk, needing space to breathe. He hiked the short trail behind the house, the one that led to the ridge with the frozen creek. The snow crunched beneath his boots. The air bit at his face. He found the old pine where he used to sit with Anna during the early winters back before Clara was born. He leaned against it, listening. And that's when he heard it. The crack of a twig. Not animal. Not random. Deliberate. He turned eyes scanning the tree line. A shadow moved too fast to catch, but there. He dropped low, pulling the rifle from his shoulder, senses sharp. Nothing. Stillness again. But the feeling lingered, eyes on him, watching. He stayed there a full 5 minutes before heading back down, more alert than ever. Someone had found their way up the mountain, and they weren't lost. Inside the cabin, Clara braided Lark's hair by the fire. Isabel stitched a patch on Nico's jacket. The seam split from where he'd caught it on a nail. He sat still for once, not out of patience, but out of quiet. I'm not good at this, he muttered. Staying still. Being part of something. Isabel didn't stop sewing. You don't have to be good. Just honest. He glanced over at Lark. She deserves better than me. She deserves someone who won't run when it gets hard. Nico looked back into the fire. Maybe I'm tired of running. You can stop. Right here. He didn't answer, but he didn't argue either. Elias returned as the fire was dimming. He walked straight to the table, set down his rifle, and said, Someone's on the ridge. Everyone went still. Did they see you? Isabel asked. Maybe. I saw tracks, clean ones, boots. Nico stood up. You think it's him? Elias nodded. Could be. Court letter came this morning. They want a hearing in Buffalo. 3 days from now. Isabel's face went pale. He found us. He's coming. Nico clenched his fists. We can leave. We won't outrun this storm. Or the law. The law ain't just, Nico said. It's just there. Elias looked at him. You still think I don't know that? They all sat quiet. Lark curled into Isabel's lap. Clara leaned her head on the arm of the couch, eyes wide open. We'll figure it out, Elias said. How? Isabel asked. Elias looked around the room at the boy, trying not to be angry, the girl trying not to be afraid, and the woman trying not to fall apart in front of them all. Together, he said, like we've done everything else. Far down the mountain past the creek and the long curve in the old buffalo trail, a man sat by a fire thumbing a silver watch. His coat was clean, his boots polished. He smiled at the crackling wood. 3 days, he murmured. 3 days and I take back what's mine. Behind him another man stirred the fire with the barrel of a shotgun. You sure they're up here? I can smell her, the first man said, like blood in water. He closed the watch with a snap. Time was running out. The morning after Elias spotted the tracks, the air felt sharp enough to draw blood. Light hadn't yet broken the horizon, but the cabin was already stirring. Elias stood by the window, a rifle cradled in his arms, eyes fixed on the trees beyond the ridge. The law ain't just. It's just there, he said quietly, almost to himself. Isabel stepped in behind him. We can fight this, right? He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched heavy as snow on the roof. Then he turned. If we're going to, it has to start now. The table was full before sunrise. Clara Nico Lark still half asleep with a blanket around her shoulders. The legal notice lay flat in the center, already stained with a drop of black coffee. Isabel scanned the paper again, even though she'd read it 5 times in the dark last night. They're calling it a retrieval, like she's property. She's not, Nico growled. That don't matter, Elias said. Not to the law. They've got his name on the birth certificate, and he's got a court order to reclaim custody. Clara stared at the letter. Does that mean they can just come in and take her? Isabel's voice cracked. Yes, if we don't stop them. No one's taking her, Nico said. Not while I'm breathing. Elias raised a hand. If we go at this like cornered wolves, they'll make sure none of you walk away free. The courts don't care about bruises unless they're fresh. They don't care about what's right. Only what's filed. Clara crossed her arms. Then what do we do? Elias looked at Isabel. We tell the truth. All of it. With witnesses. Isabel hesitated. Who'd believe us? I know someone in Buffalo. Naomi Chavez, county clerk. She was a friend of Anna's. If we give her enough, she might be able to delay the hearing or file for emergency guardianship. Will it hold up? It might buy us time. Time for what Nico asked. To prove he's unfit, and to give you a chance to speak on your own terms. Isabel's hands were shaking. I've spent so long hiding. I don't know if I even remember how to fight. Elias reached across the table and stilled her hands. You remember. You just need someone to remind you what it feels like. 2 hours later, they packed up the wagon. Lark wrapped tight in furs, Clara bundled beside her. Isabel sat up front beside Elias, a satchel of folded papers, receipts, and the one photo she had of her sister and Lark together clenched in her lap. Nico took the saddle and rode ahead, scouting the trail. He said nothing as they left, but his eyes scanned every bend like he expected shadows to leap out at them. They didn't speak much on the way down. The trail into Buffalo was long, winding, and cruel in winter. The horses slipped more than once. Elias's jaw stayed tight the whole way. When they reached the outskirts of town, the sun was slipping low, casting Buffalo's main street in orange and frost. The courthouse loomed ahead, plain, squat, and merciless. They parked near the steps. Elias helped Isabel down and looked her square in the eyes. This is yours, not mine, but I'll stand with you. She nodded once, then took Lark's hand and led her inside. Naomi Chavez was smaller than Isabel expected, sharp eyes, kind mouth, braided silver hair. She wore a brown wool coat and had a filing drawer in one hand when Elias introduced them. "You always did show up with trouble on your heels," Naomi said, smiling. "This time it's not mine," Elias said. Naomi looked over the paperwork, her brow furrowed at the forgery marks and corrections. "You understand this won't hold?" Isabel nodded. "I'm not trying to lie anymore. I just want to protect her." Naomi turned to Lark, who clung to Isabel's coat. "Hi, sweetheart." Lark blinked, then almost inaudibly whispered, "Hi." Naomi's face softened. "She talk much." "She didn't speak for months," Clara offered. "Only started again a few days ago." Naomi sat at her desk. "The judge won't care about that unless we can tie it to something. Abuse, neglect, trauma." "She was there the night her mother died," Isabel said. "She saw him hit her." "Can you prove it?" "I can't. But I have these." She pulled out the photo. "And this is her birthmark. My sister's. Lark has the same one." Naomi studied the photo. "It's not evidence, but it helps." She slid the file into a locked drawer. "You'll testify, yes. You're risking jail." "I know." Naomi nodded slowly. "Then let's prepare." The next morning, the courtroom was small but full. Wood-paneled walls, dusty benches, and a single judge at the far end beneath a creaky ceiling fan that didn't spin. Robert Holloway entered in a suit too clean for this town. His boots gleamed, his smile was fixed and hollow. When he saw Isabel, his eyes narrowed, then landed on Lark and softened artificially. "There's my girl," he said. Lark flinched. Isabel stepped in front of her, fists clenched. The bailiff barked, "All rise," and the proceedings began. The judge asked for statements. Naomi stood beside Isabel, filing for temporary guardianship. Robert's lawyer objected immediately. "She's a known fugitive," he said. "She forged names, crossed state lines, and abducted the child. She fled domestic violence," Naomi snapped, "and has cared for the child for months with no support." "Any police reports?" No, Isabel admitted. Robert rose. "She poisoned my daughter against me, lied about who I was." Naomi turned to him. "And how would you describe the night your wife died?" His face hardened. "Tragic, but an accident." "Witnesses," she slipped. "Lark saw you," Naomi said. She's six and terrified." The judge held up a hand. "Enough. This is a custody review, not a criminal trial." He turned to Isabel. "You understand the consequences of interfering with a court order?" "I do," she said, standing tall. "And you're prepared to face those consequences?" "I am." The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm issuing a temporary delay. 2 weeks. At that time, a child welfare officer will conduct an interview and assess the home environment. Until then, the child remains with the petitioner." Robert exploded. "You can't do that. She's a liar. She's nothing." Elias stood up at the back of the room. "She's more of a parent than you've ever been." Robert turned. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching you long enough to see the truth." The judge banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Outside in the frozen afternoon sun, Isabel fell to her knees and pulled Lark close. Elias put a hand on her shoulder. "We bought time." Clara stood beside Nico, holding the court slip. 2 weeks. "It's not forever," Nico said. "But it's not the end either." Far off on a telegraph wire, a message was sent to a man with too much money and too many connections. "Delay won't last." The man read it, smiled, and ordered a telegram of his own. Find the cabin. End this. Quietly. A man ain't measured by his rage, but by who he'll burn for it, Elias said as he loaded the rifle, slow and steady eyes on the tree line. And right now, I'd burn the whole goddamn forest if it meant keeping her safe. The wind howled through the valley, colder than it should have been for late March. Snow clung to the pines in heavy, wet clumps, and the sky looked like it had forgotten how to be blue. They were back on the mountain 2 days after the hearing. The moment the judge gave them 2 weeks, Elias had packed everyone back to the cabin. There was safety in distance. Or there had been. But this morning, Nico found a half-burned matchstick beside the creek, buried in old tracks that hadn't been there yesterday. Now Elias stood watch. Think it's him? Nico asked, tightening the strap on his saddlebag. It ain't a hunter, Elias said. And it damn sure ain't a hiker. Not in this weather. So he sent someone. Elias nodded. He's not coming through the court now. He's coming through the back door. Nico's fists clenched. Then we don't wait for them to knock. No, Elias said, slinging the rifle over his shoulder. We prepare. Inside the cabin, Clara was organizing canned goods while Isabel checked every window latch twice. Lark sat curled in the corner, the rag doll pressed tight to her chest. I don't want to go again, she whispered. Isabel crouched beside her. You won't. Not unless we all go together. You promise, Isabel paused, then kissed the girl's forehead. I'll promise to fight for you, as hard as I can, for as long as it takes. Clara watched them. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't stop working. We should leave, she said suddenly. Just go now. Keep moving. Elias stepped in, stamping snow off his boots. No. If we run, we lose. They'll hunt us harder. He's not going to stop. I know. Isabel stood. What do we do? Elias looked around the cabin, the patched roof, the warm hearth, the little girl hugging a doll like it was armor. We don't fight fair. We fight smart. By nightfall, the trap lines were reset. Nico had laid out 3 false trails across the western ridge, all laced with broken branches and baited prints. Elias cleaned every rifle, every pistol. Clara rechecked the pantry and took stock of dry wood. Isabel repacked the emergency kit, bandages, a flask of whiskey, extra bullets. No one said the word siege, but it was in every glance. That night, no one slept. The first shot rang out just past midnight. Not close. Not aimed. Just a warning. Elias was already at the door when it came, rifle in hand. Nico was behind him in seconds. North Ridge. 1 shooter. Could be 2. We'll know soon enough. Clara ran into the room, heart hammering. Should I wake Lark? No, Isabel said from the hall. Let her sleep, for now. They moved through the cabin like clockwork. Elias stationed Nico by the barn window. Clara and Isabel stayed in the pantry with Lark and the supplies. Elias lit 1 lantern and placed it in the front window. A signal. He waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then a voice called out from the dark. Redford. Come out and talk like a man. Elias stepped onto the porch. Rifle ready, but not raised. Snow crunched behind him, Nico watching from the side. The figure that emerged from the trees was wrapped in oilskin, face shadowed, but the stance was too relaxed for a lawman. Got a message from Robert Holloway, the man said. Says he's done waiting. Then he should have come himself. He did. He's just sitting back far enough not to catch a bullet. Elias didn't blink. This ain't a ranch standoff. There's a child inside. A family. You got 48 hours to hand her over. or we come take her." Elias tilted his head. "That a threat?" The man grinned. "That's a courtesy." Elias slowly raised the rifle. "This is my reply." The man's grin faltered. Then he stepped back into the dark. Elias didn't fire, but the message was sent. When he stepped back inside, Clara was waiting by the fire. "You should have shot him." Elias shook his head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because they still think they're in control." "That's their mistake." Nico came in behind him, pulling the door shut. "He said 48 hours. But he lied." "I know," Elias said. "They'll be back by dawn." Isabel didn't sleep. She lay beside Lark, listening to her daughter breathe. The little girl murmured something in her sleep, a mix of her name and a song she used to hum when the world was kinder. Isabel closed her eyes, letting the sound wrap around her like armor. At first light, the attack came. It wasn't an army, just 3 men fast and loud trying to scare more than kill. But they didn't expect what met them. The first man tripped a tripwire Nico had set. His leg snapped at the knee, and he screamed loud enough to wake the valley. The second took a bullet to the shoulder from Clara, steady hands, eyes full of fire. The third reached the porch before Elias stepped out and cracked him across the temple with the butt of his rifle. It was over in less than 2 minutes. The snow soaked red in 3 places. 1 man dead, 1 wounded, 1 unconscious. They tied the survivors to a post near the barn. Elias stood over them, breathing heavy. "We got names," the wounded one spat blood. "You're dead men." "You hear me?" Elias knelt beside him. "I hear you, but you're wrong." Then he stood and looked at Nico. "Time to deliver a message of our own." They loaded the third man's horse with a note. "Next time, we don't miss." They sent him down the trail with the wounded man tied behind the saddle. The dead one they buried beneath the pine ridge under the snow, nameless and unmarked. Elias said nothing over the grave, just shoveled the dirt. That night Isabel stood at the fire staring at the flames. "He's not going to stop." "No," Elias said. "But neither are we." "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "This much for us." Elias looked at her, voice low. "A man ain't measured by his rage, but by who he'll burn for it." She watched him for a long time, then finally whispered, "Then I hope you don't burn alone." Outside in the woods beyond sight, a man watched the lantern light flicker in the Redford cabin. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Waiting. Some men carry grief like guns, loaded quiet and always ready. Elias sat on the front porch with his rifle across his lap. The snow had crusted over in the night, shining like glass beneath the moon. A curl of smoke from his pipe danced in the frigid air. He hadn't moved in hours, just sat, watching. The others were inside asleep or pretending to be. After what happened the night before, the air in the cabin had turned tense, brittle like a pane of winter glass just waiting for a crack. He touched the barrel of the gun with his gloved fingers. Not out of fear, out of memory. It had belonged to his father, then his brother, now him. Grief like iron passed from hand to hand. Nico stepped outside, boots crunching snow. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned on the porch railing, staring out at the woods. "You think they're coming again?" he asked after a long silence. "Probably," Elias said, "but not tonight." "You sure?" "Nope." Nico kicked a loose board. "You ever bury someone you didn't know how to forgive?" Elias didn't flinch. "Yeah." "Did it help?" Not even a little. Nico nodded, like that made sense. I keep thinking he said if I'd fought back sooner, if I'd stopped him, maybe my sister wouldn't have died. Maybe Lark wouldn't be having nightmares every time she hears a man's voice. Elias's voice was quiet. That guilt you're dragging around, that ain't penance. It's weight. And if you don't learn to carry it right, it'll bury you. I don't want to carry it. Too bad. That's part of being the one left. Nico looked at him. Is that why you fight so hard? For Clara, for Isabel, 'cause of what you lost, Elias's jaw clenched. Some men carry grief like guns loaded quiet and always ready. Some men shoot the wrong people with it. I try not to. A long pause passed between them. Then Nico said, I think I want to stay. Elias turned. You already have. Inside the cabin, Clara lay in bed with Lark curled against her side. Isabel sat at the small table near the stove, hands wrapped around a cup of tea long since gone cold. Her eyes flicked toward the window every few seconds, like expecting the trees to reach in and take everything back. Do you think the judge will believe me? She whispered when Clara came to refill her water. Clara sat down across from her. I don't know. I've never told the whole truth. Not once. Not even to myself. Clara stirred her cup slowly. Then maybe it's time. Isabel looked at her eyes heavy. You ever feel like you've lived too many lives in one skin? Clara nodded. I used to, but now I just try to live this one better. Isabel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Clara leaned in. Tell me what happened. All of it. And Isabel did. She talked until her voice broke. About the bruises her sister wore like long sleeves in July. About the screaming through the floorboards. About the night she found her sister face down in the barn, Lark crying beside her, Robert's boot prints still fresh in the mud. About how she ran, didn't think, just grabbed the baby and Samuel, and kept moving until her name didn't echo anymore. I don't even know if what I did was right, she finished. It was, Clara said. You saved her. You saved both of them. Isabel wiped her face. I've spent so long trying not to be noticed, I forgot what it feels like to stand up. Clara took her hand. Then let this be your moment. They sat in silence as the fire crackled, and upstairs Lark let out a breath in her sleep that sounded like peace. Morning brought snow, thick and fast. The mountain looked like it was disappearing into itself. Elias came in with his coat stiff from frost. There's movement down by the old trailhead. Could be deer, Nico said, though he didn't sound convinced. Could be them coming early. They're not waiting for court, Isabel said. No, Elias replied. They're waiting for a window. Clara looked around. So what now? We just sit and wait for the window to break? No, Elias said. We break it first. They set out just after noon. Elias, Nico, and Clara took the horses down toward the lower clearing, where the trail split near the abandoned sawmill. If Holloway's men were camping out, they'd be there. They left Isabel and Lark with a loaded shotgun and strict instructions: lock the door, speak to no one, and fire if needed. Snow made the world quiet. Too quiet. At the clearing, they found it an old fire pit, fresh ashes, boot prints in circles, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey with Robert Holloway's initials etched into the side. He's close, Clara whispered. Elias knelt by the ashes, felt the warmth still rising. Close enough to smell us, he said. Nico scanned the tree line. So what's the plan? We split. You two circle wide, come in from the north. I'll draw him out. You sure? Clara asked. Elias looked up at her. I've got more ghosts than you. They'll follow me first. Nico handed him a revolver. Don't miss. Elias moved like a shadow through the trees. Rifle down, breath shallow. The cold bit at his face, but his nerves were calm, too calm. Grief had a way of hollowing a man out until only instinct remained. He made it 30 yards before he heard the click of a hammer. Drop it, a voice said behind him. Elias froze. The figure stepped out, clean boots, polished coat, and Robert Holloway's crooked smile beneath a black hat. You're a stubborn old bastard, Robert said. Elias didn't turn. And you're predictable. Robert raised the rifle. Give her up. Elias slowly set his own rifle down. She ain't yours. I got the law. You had it. You lost it the minute you put your hands on her mother. Robert's smile twitched. You can't prove that. No, Elias said, but I can make sure you don't touch another child again. Robert stepped forward, gun aimed at Elias's back. And that's when the shot rang out. Not from Elias, from Clara. She'd flanked them from the north and fired clean bullets, striking Robert in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Before he could scream, Nico tackled him from the trees, knocking the rifle out of his hands. Robert hit the ground hard, snow kicking up like smoke. Elias stood over him, rifle in hand. I told you we'd end this, he said. This is your end. Robert laughed through blood. You think this matters? I've got men. Money. A name. And we've got each other, Clara said. Nico tied Robert's hands behind his back. Not so loud now, are you? They dragged him to the old shed near the cabin. He wasn't dead, just wounded and furious. Isabel stood in the doorway when they returned. She looked at Robert, bound and beaten, then at Elias. He nodded. You don't have to hide anymore. She stepped forward. Robert glared at her. You ruined everything. No, Isabel said, voice quiet but steady. I survived it. She turned to Lark, who was watching from behind the window. And for the first time she smiled like she believed she could protect her. You don't heal by erasing the past. You heal by owning what it made you. Isabel stood outside the shed, watching her breath rise in the morning air. It had snowed lightly overnight, just enough to blur the footprints leading to where they'd locked Robert. The weight of everything hung in her bones, and still she stood. Inside, Robert groaned, shifting in the chair Nico had tied him to. His arm was bandaged roughly, blood seeping through. Elias had checked the wound twice, he'd live. And that was the point. Clara came up behind Isabel, carrying a tin mug of hot water. He's awake, asking for you. I figured he would. You don't have to go in there. Isabel took the mug, her hands trembling only slightly. Yes, I do. The shed was cold and dim, smelling of oil and old wood. Robert sat slumped, eyes narrowed. When Isabel stepped in, he straightened, trying to look composed, but the pain etched in his face betrayed him. Well, he said with mock cheer, look who finally found her voice. Isabel set the mug on the work table and didn't sit. I don't want your version of an apology. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Robert scoffed. Truth that's rich. You lied your way across state lines to protect a child from the man who killed her mother. His jaw flexed. Prove it. She saw you. She was a baby. She remembers enough. Robert shifted in his chair. You're not a saint, Isabel. You didn't save her. You took her. You made her scared of her own blood. Isabel stepped closer, voice firm. I didn't make her afraid. You did. With your fists. With your yelling. With the way you made every room small when you walked in. He stared at her, breathing heavy. "You can twist it all you want," she said. "But the past is what it is, and it made me someone who isn't afraid of you anymore." Robert didn't speak. Isabel turned toward the door. "You think they'll keep her with you," he said bitterly. "You think you've won," she paused. "I don't need to win. I just need her safe." Back in the cabin, Lark sat by the hearth tracing lines on the wooden floor with a stick of charcoal. She'd drawn a house, then a sun, then 4 stick figures standing hand in hand. "Can I add a dog?" she asked Elias, who was carving a piece of wood nearby. "Sure," he said, not looking up. She sketched one long tail, floppy ears. "Do you think he'll leave?" she asked. Elias stopped carving. "One day," he said. "But not today." Lark nodded, not upset, just thoughtful. "I want him to go far away, so Mama can rest." Elias's throat tightened. He reached out and smoothed a bit of hair from her face. "She's resting, baby, because of you." Later that day, Naomi Chavez arrived. She came by wagon cloak, dusted with snow, her breath misting in the cold. She greeted Elias at the gate with a hug that said she'd traveled more than miles. "I heard what happened," she said. "We kept it quiet." "Doesn't matter. Word travels, and the judge wants a follow-up. Tomorrow." Elias cursed under his breath. Too soon. Naomi looked him in the eye. "They're pushing for final custody. If Robert's people get a whiff that he's here and wounded, it'll backfire." "He threatened them," Elias said. "Prove it." He looked toward the shed. "I don't want him near Lark. Then give the court a reason to keep him away." They brought Naomi inside, where Isabel recounted everything again. Her words steadier this time, like muscle built from scar. Clara added her own pieces. Nico sat silent through most of it, until Naomi asked if he had anything to say. He looked up, dark eyes steady. "I used to think keeping quiet kept people safe, that not saying what happened made it less real." And now Naomi asked, "Now I know silence is just another kind of weapon." That evening, as the sun fell behind the pines, Isabel found herself sitting with Elias on the back steps. The air smelled like wood smoke and thaw. "I thought I'd be more scared," she said, facing him, facing court. "You're still scared," Elias replied. "Yeah, but it doesn't own me." They sat in quiet for a bit. "Do you think I've changed?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think you finally showed up." She smiled at that, tired and real. "I didn't used to believe in healing." "You don't heal by erasing the past," Elias said, gazing into the distance. "You heal by owning what it made you." She looked at him. "And what did yours make you?" He exhaled slow. "A man who still don't know how to stop blaming himself." She rested her head on his shoulder. That night they slept in shifts again. Nico took first watch, then Clara, then Elias. Isabel stayed by Lark's side, holding her hand like it anchored her. Outside, the snow melted slowly in patches, like the land itself was waking from a long, hard sleep. Morning came with gold light across the valley. Naomi left at dawn to return to town, promising to speak to the judge to push for the emergency hearing. Robert was still in the shed, quiet, resigned. Elias checked his bandage. "You've got 1 day left in this place. After that, we hand you to the sheriff." Robert didn't argue. Maybe it was the silence that felt like victory. Later, Lark drew a new picture. This time 5 people. Still a sun. Still a house. But now there were roots beneath it. Big, branching ones. "Tree family," she told Clara. Roots so we don't blow away. Clara smiled, hugging her close. The day passed slow but calm. Elias took Lark fishing down at the creek while Isabel chopped firewood with Clara. For the first time in weeks, there was laughter. Small and fragile, but it was there. But the peace wouldn't hold long. That night, a rider was spotted at the edge of the ridge, just a flash of motion, then gone. Naomi sent word the final hearing was set for tomorrow morning. No delays, no extensions. They had one shot. Elias stood by the fire, staring into the flames. Nico joined him. "You ready?" he asked. Elias didn't look away. "Doesn't matter." Clara stepped into the room holding Lark, who was already dressed for travel. "She wants to go," she said. "She wants them to hear her." Elias met the girl's eyes, and Lark nodded. A child's voice shouldn't have to roar to be heard. The courtroom in Buffalo was too warm for the cold still clinging to their boots. Snow melted off their coats and pooled on the wooden floor. The judge hadn't even entered yet, but the air was already heavy. Not with heat, but with the weight of what was about to be decided. Isabel sat stiff-backed on the bench, her hands in her lap, one wrapped tightly around Lark's. The little girl's feet didn't touch the ground. She swung them slow and rhythmic like she was counting time. Elias, Nico, and Clara stood behind them. Naomi Chavez paced quietly near the door, papers folded neatly in her arms. When the bailiff finally opened the inner door and the judge stepped in silence, dropped like a hammer. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Robert Holloway was already there, sitting on the opposite bench, flanked by a sharp-suited lawyer and a scowl like carved stone. His wounded arm was hidden under a fresh coat and a sling, no signs of the night he'd tried to take his daughter by force. No signs of the man behind the bruise. Judge Vernon Yates was old enough to see through performance. His gray eyes swept the room before he spoke. "This is a custody hearing, not a trial," he said. "But it may feel like both. I've read the briefs, heard the statements. What I want now is truth, not performances, not theatrics." He looked to Robert first. "You filed for full custody of Lark Holloway on the grounds that she was taken without consent by the respondent Isabel Raines. Is that correct?" Robert nodded. "And you claim she forged documents, falsified identities, and endangered the child by fleeing across state lines?" "Yes, sir." Judge Yates turned to Naomi. "And your side?" Naomi rose. "We claim that Isabel Raines acted to protect the child from a dangerous domestic situation after the mother, her sister, was found dead under circumstances the child witnessed." "Was a report filed?" the judge asked. "No," Naomi said, "because there was no one left to file it. The respondent feared for the child's life." Robert scoffed. "Convenient." Yates held up a hand. "Enough. I will ask the questions." Then he looked at Lark. The room went still. The judge softened his voice. "Lark, do you feel comfortable talking to me today?" Lark didn't move. Her fingers tightened around Isabel's. Isabel leaned down. "You can baby. You don't have to yell. You just have to say what's true." The judge nodded. "We can clear the room if it helps." Lark shook her head. "No. I want them to hear me." He gave her a moment, then asked, "Do you know why you're here?" Lark nodded. "Because someone wants to take me away." "Who?" She pointed quiet but steady at Robert. "And do you want to go with him?" "No." "Why not?" Lark's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "Because he made Mama cry. He hit her. He said it was because she was weak. But she wasn't. She was scared. A hush spread through the courtroom like a wind. The judge leaned forward. "Did he ever hit you?" No, Lark said. But he looked at me like he wanted to. Robert stood suddenly. "She's 6 years old. This is hearsay." The judge raised his voice. "Sit down." Robert did, fuming. Lark looked at him. "I saw you that night. You pushed her." Then she stopped moving. Isabel's breath hitched. Naomi stepped in. "Your Honor, this child has only recently begun to speak of that night. We believe forcing her to recount more may do more harm." The judge nodded. "I've heard enough from her." He looked at Lark gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. You were very brave." Then to the room, a child's voice shouldn't have to roar to be heard. But when it does, everyone damn well better listen. He turned to Robert. "Do you have anything to say?" Robert smirked. "She's a child. Scared. Manipulated. That woman," he pointed at Isabel, "has poisoned her against me." "Then why, Mr. Holloway," the judge said, voice low, "did you attempt to retrieve your daughter with 2 armed men in the middle of the night?" Robert paled. "You were reported by the local sheriff," the judge continued, "who found your hired men wounded on private land. You never reported your daughter missing. You never filed a protective order. And you never sought grief counseling after your wife's death. But you have had time to hire private investigators, track a woman across states, and send men with weapons to extract a child like she was a parcel." Robert had no answer. Judge Yates turned to Isabel. "You broke the law when you left." "I know," she said. "But you also gave a child safety shelter and family when no one else did." "I tried." "And you succeeded." He took a deep breath. "Effective immediately, full guardianship is awarded to Isabel Raines pending formal adoption proceedings. Robert Holloway is barred from contact with the child until further notice." The gavel dropped. Isabel blinked as if waiting for someone to object. But no one did. Robert didn't even look at her. He stood, shook his lawyer's hand with a stiff motion, and walked out the side door, disappearing like a shadow at sunset. Lark looked up at Isabel. "Does that mean I stay?" Isabel pulled her into her arms. "It means you're home." They rode back up the mountain in silence. No one needed to speak. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. Like the stillness after a storm when the ground soaks in the rain and begins again. At the cabin, Clara cooked stew and let Lark stir the pot. Nico chopped firewood with more rhythm than anger. Elias sat on the porch watching the snow melt in slow circles the way peace does when it finally finds its way back. Isabel joined him. "You really think we're safe now?" she asked. "No," Elias said. "But we're standing. And that's a start. Some homes are built with timber, others with blood memory and stubborn hope." Spring came slow to the mountain. The last of the snow melted in long veins, revealing patches of frozen earth, scattered pine needles, and the bones of the long winter. The river ran faster now, bloated with meltwater and change. Birds came back in small waves. So did quiet. It had been a week since the court ruling. A week since they brought Lark home for good. Inside the cabin, everything felt the same but different. The walls were the same rough wood, the hearth still crackled the same way at dusk, and the kettle still whistled when forgotten. But the fear was gone, or at least gone enough to breathe. Isabel stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in soap water. The window before her looked out over the clearing where Elias and Nico were splitting logs. Lark sat on a stump nearby, drawing again this time, in a real sketchbook Clara had picked up in town. She was using colors now. Clara stirred stew behind her. "Feels like we blinked and survived." Isabel smiled. Feels like we were holding our breath for months and just now remembered how to exhale. Clara nodded, ladling broth into a bowl. You think he's really gone, maybe? Doesn't matter if he isn't. He can't touch her anymore. Not legally, not physically, and not where it counts. The door creaked open, and Elias stepped in shaking snow from his boots. Creaks rising faster than expected. Might flood the lower trail. I'll check the sandbags tomorrow, Isabel said automatically. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's the third time this week you've volunteered for something hard. She shrugged. I think I like earning my place. You already did. He looked toward the window. Lark had started drawing a porch swing complete with crooked chains and wildflowers underneath. She's different now, Elias said. Still quiet. Still careful. But lighter. Isabel dried her hands. She's starting to believe the bad part's over. Nico came in next, carrying an armload of kindling. There's a fox den near the ridge. Spooked it by accident. Clara turned. Did you hurt it? No. Just startled the mother. She barked at me and vanished. Smart fox. He nodded. She was protecting her own. There was a pause. Then Elias said, we all were. That evening, they ate together, no fear, no silence. Just the clink of spoons and the sound of Lark's voice asking if soup could ever be blue. No one knew how to answer that, but they laughed anyway. After dinner, Clara pulled out a box of old nails and wood. Time we fixed the front steps before one of us breaks something. Isabel stood. I'll help. Elias followed. I'll grab the hammer. Nico stayed with Lark, who was building a small house out of firewood scraps. What are you making? He asked. A cabin like ours. Looks good. I'm going to put all of us inside, she said. So if it ever snows too hard again, we won't get lost. Nico smiled. You've got a good heart, kid. She looked up at him, serious. Mama says homes aren't just where we sleep. They're where we're safe. She's right. She picked up a stick and pressed it into the side of the cabin. This is the hope beam. The beam that keeps everything from falling down when you're scared. He nodded slowly. Every good home needs one of those. Outside, Elias knelt by the steps, holding a new plank in place. These boards have been cracked since before you got here, he told Isabel. She smiled. Figured as much. But we never got around to fixing them. Not really. Isabel held the nail steady while Elias drove it in. Funny. I kept thinking I had to wait to feel settled before I did anything. But maybe it's the doing that makes you settle. Elias looked at her. Exactly. Clara passed them another board. Home isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, even if you've got to start from splinters. Later that night, they lit the lanterns early. The sky was clouded over again, and wind whispered against the shutters. Lark curled up with her sketchbook by the fire. Isabel sat beside her, running fingers through the girl's hair. Elias watched from the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, heart wrapped around the moment. Do you miss them? Lark asked suddenly. Who? Isabel asked. My mama. Isabel took a breath. Every day. Lark nodded like she understood more than any child should. I think she'd like it here. She'd love it, Isabel whispered. Because you're here. They didn't speak after that. They didn't have to. Some things don't need words. Elias stepped out onto the porch around midnight, checking the trail one more time. Snow flurried in small bursts. The wind smelled like thaw and pine bark. Nico joined him, leaning on the railing. It's quiet, too quiet, no, just quiet. The kind you don't want to disturb. Elias took a deep breath. You think it lasts? Nico didn't answer right away. Some homes are built with timber, he said finally. Others with blood memory and stubborn hope. Elias nodded slowly. And this one, all three. Inside, the fire burned low. Outside, the mountain stood tall. The storm had passed, but the cabin didn't forget what it took to hold through it. And neither did the people inside. Even a wounded heart can teach you how to stay. The first thunder of the season rolled in just after dusk. Low and long, like the groaning of the earth itself stretching awake after a long freeze. Lark had never heard mountain thunder before. She dropped her colored pencils and crawled closer to Isabel on the settee. "Is it angry?" she asked. Isabel brushed the girl's hair back. "No, baby. Just loud." Outside, the wind picked up. Elias stepped onto the porch to secure the shutters. The rain hadn't come yet, but the clouds moved like they were searching for a fight. Clara pulled the stew pot from the fire and poured an extra ladleful into a bowl. "I always feed storms," she said, "just in case they're hungry and leave us be." Nico smirked from the corner. "Is that superstition or hospitality?" "Same thing where I come from," she answered. The wind rattled the roof once, sharp and sudden. Lark flinched but didn't cry. Not this time. "We've survived worse," Elias said when he came back inside, brushing water from his shoulders. But still, they all stayed close that night. Because old habits die slow, and safety once taken takes time to trust. Later, after Lark had fallen asleep beside the hearth, and Clara had gone to her room, Isabel sat with Elias by the window. Rain had started quiet but steady hissing against the glass. "Storms make me restless," she said. "Me too." She looked at him. "You ever think about leaving before?" "All the time. This place, it gets into your bones. Not always kindly. But now..." He didn't answer right away. "Now I think about what I'd be leaving behind." Isabel traced the rim of her mug. "I used to be good at leaving. It felt safer than staying. No roots. No promises." Elias leaned back. "And now..." She looked at the sleeping child. "Now I want to stay so bad it scares me." He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. The next morning, the storm had passed. The mountain gleamed, washed clean. Trees dripped. The sky stretched out wide blue and forgiving. Elias went out early to check the riverbank and returned with a surprise: an injured dog, limping and soaked, found curled beneath a fallen tree. Lark named him Buckle for the way his back leg bent like a clasp. He was thin, scared, and covered in old scars. "He looks like he's run a long way," Isabel said, kneeling beside him. "From what Lark asked." "Doesn't matter," Clara said. "He found where he needs to be. The dog wouldn't eat at first, wouldn't come near anyone but Lark." She sat beside him in the barn, whispering stories into his ear while feeding him scraps of dried meat. "You don't have to like people," she told him. I didn't either for a while. Later, when she thought no one was looking, she wrapped her old scarf around his neck and whispered, "You can stay. I won't make you leave." That night, while Elias carved another plank for the front steps, Isabel joined him with a cup of tea. "She's different," she said. "More settled." "So are you," Elias replied. Isabel looked at him. "I still feel like I'm pretending sometimes. Like I built a life on stolen time." "You didn't steal anything," he said. "You fought for it." But what if it doesn't last? Elias set his carving down. Nothing ever does. Not exactly. But you don't stop planting seeds just because winter comes. Isabel stared out at the barn where Lark's laughter echoed faintly. Even a wounded heart can teach you how to stay. Elias looked at her then. Really looked. And for once, she didn't look away. The next day brought mail. Naomi had sent a letter confirming the adoption process was officially underway. Papers had been filed, hearings scheduled, and the judge had noted in his remarks that Lark showed a remarkable emotional bond with her guardian and community. Isabel read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into the keepsake box she kept under her bed, the one that held old photographs, a dried flower from her sister's grave, and a note Lark once scribbled that said, "I love you, Mama," in crooked letters. Clara caught her sitting there. "You all right?" Isabel nodded. "Just thinking how fast a life can change." Clara sat beside her. "Yeah. Sometimes all it takes is saying yes to the wrong person, or the right one." They both smiled at that. In the evening, Buckle finally limped into the cabin on his own. He curled beside the fire and let Lark rest her head on his side. "He likes it here," she whispered. Nico scratched behind the dog's ear. He earned it. Isabel stepped outside, drawn by the stars. The mountain sky was clear, sharp, endless. She wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes. A moment later, Elias joined her. "I keep expecting someone to show up and take it all away," she said. "They won't. But if they did, then we'd fight again," he said. "And again, and again, because you're not running anymore." She looked at him. "What if I told you I wanted to stay? Not just for Lark, for me." He smiled, slow and real. "Then I'd tell you I already knew." A pause. "And then you're part of this place now." She leaned against the railing, shoulders relaxed. "Feels strange. Letting something become home." He reached out gently, took her hand. "Strange doesn't mean wrong," he said. And for the first time in years, she believed it. Peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the decision to keep building anyway. It was late summer when the official papers arrived. Not with a bang, not with a knock. Just a quiet envelope tucked into the mailbox at the edge of the trail, creased from the journey and speckled with dust. Lark carried it in like treasure, holding it high above her head with both hands. "It's here," she shouted as she burst through the cabin door. Clara looked up from the kitchen table. Nico paused mid-swing in the yard axe halfway to the next log. Elias stepped off the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Isabel froze. Lark held the envelope out to her. "It has your name. And mine." Isabel took it gently. Her hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with something weightier. She sat down at the table and opened it, breath shallow. Inside, final confirmation from the court. The last signature. The final stamp. Legal guardianship. Official adoption. Lark was hers. No more questions, no more shadows waiting just around the bend. She set the letter down slowly, blinking back tears. "Is it real?" Lark asked. Isabel pulled her into a hug so tight it nearly knocked them both over. "Yeah, baby. It's real." That night they celebrated the only way they knew how honest and simple. Clara baked a pie from early berries. Nico pulled out an old fiddle and tuned it by ear. Elias carved a new sign for the cabin and let Lark pick the name. She chose Rooted. They nailed the sign to the front porch just above the door. This way, she said, nobody gets lost. After dinner, as dusk painted the world in gold and violet, they all sat on the porch, boots up, hearts settled. Nico leaned back, the last note of a slow tune hanging in the air. It's strange, isn't it, how something that started with a letter could end with one? Clara smiled. A beginning disguised as an end. Elias sipped his coffee. I think they're always the same thing. Lark yawned and curled up beside Isabel Buckle, settling at her feet. Can I tell you something? She mumbled sleepily. Anything, Isabel said. I don't feel scared at night anymore. Isabel wrapped an arm around her. You don't have to. We're here. And we're staying. The stars came out slow that night. No wind, no threat, just the hush of trees and the rhythm of breath. Isabel looked out over the clearing, the clothesline, the woodpile, the old rocking chair, still squeaky no matter how much Elias tried to fix it. She thought about what it meant to build a life. Not the kind with fences and papers, but the kind with time and trust and small moments that stacked like stones into something strong enough to weather the years. Lark was safe. She was loved. And that made the whole battle worth it. Later, after Lark had gone to bed, Isabel and Elias stood at the edge of the porch watching the moonlight slip over the trees. Never thought I'd end up here, she said. Elias nodded. Me neither. Do you think we'll get more quiet seasons, Abby? Maybe not. She glanced at him. That a yes or a no? He smiled, tired and real. That's a, we'll be all right either way. They stood together a while longer. Then Isabel said, Thank you. For what? For showing me that staying isn't weak. That peace is something you fight for too. Elias looked at her. You did more than stay. You made a home. She touched the wooden railing, the initials carved into it. Liecn. It wasn't just me. No, he agreed. But you were the first one brave enough to believe in it. Seasons would keep turning. The river would rise and fall. Trees would bend in storms, and roofs would need patching, and hearts would get heavy sometimes. But none of that scared them anymore. Because peace wasn't about everything being perfect. It wasn't quiet or still or guaranteed. It was about choosing to keep building even when you're tired, even when it hurts, especially then. And that's what they did. Together. They built a life. Not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. The cabin stayed warm, the fire stayed lit, and the love flawed fierce and forever stayed strong, rooted, right where it belonged.